Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's story. In a world of billion-dollar contracts and immense wealth, what if a successful CEO is hiding a secret that could shatter his family? What happens when true love forces him to choose between the path of his heart and his family's expectations? And will an unexpected tragedy change everything? Join us to the end of this emotional film to find out the answers. And if you love this story, please help us reach 1,000 followers by hitting the subscribe button. The citrus groves stretched for miles beneath a sun that baked the earth. A vast, verdant promise of wealth. From his sterile, glass-walled office, CEO Alex saw only the quantifiable value of this expanse, a tapestry of numbers and contracts. He was a man of immense purpose, his days a symphony of meetings and market analyses. Yet his soul was a ship without a rudder. His mind, unbidden, would drift from the meticulously arranged spreadsheets to the memory of a quiet farm, to the hands of the woman who worked the soil. Lytuna. Her life was a study in simplicity, a world away from the polished veneer of his own. But in her gentle smile, and in the unspoken wisdom of her eyes, he found a profound sense of home he could not acquire with any amount of wealth. This love, so fiercely real, was a secret he carried like a sacred burden. He knew his family, a pillar of their community, had long held a different vision for his future, one paved with prestige and social standing. The weight of their expectations felt like a silent accusation, a deep chasm separating his two lives. He had to bridge it. Today. With a resolve born of a restless heart, he walked down the grand, echoing hallway, his footsteps a quiet march toward a difficult truth. He reached his mother's study, his hand hovering over the cool brass of the doorknob. A whisper of fear, a ghost of a past rejection, made his fingers tremble. He couldn't do it. Not yet. The courage he had gathered dissolved like morning mist, and he turned, retreating into the lonely silence of his own grand house, the unspoken truth a stone in his heart. He found his mother in the living room, a space so grand it felt hollow. He sat down, the scent of fresh grapefruit from a nearby basket, a silent reminder of his other world. "Mom, I have something I need to tell you," he began, his voice barely a whisper against the silence of the large room. She smiled, her eyes softening. "Alex, my child, you are over 30 now. I only want you to be happy, to get married so I can have grandchildren to hold." The words were a soft blow, a well-meaning but heavy expectation. She spoke of her friends, of their bustling family lives, her loneliness palpable. "I have a girlfriend," he said, the words a difficult confession. Her smile widened, a wave of relief washing over her face. "Don't be shy, Alex. I support you," she reassured him, her hand reaching for his. This was it, the moment to speak of Lytuna, of the simple farm, of the life he truly wanted. Just as the name formed on his lips, his phone vibrated, a sharp, intrusive buzz. He glanced at the screen. Adam. A contract needed signing. An urgent issue that demanded his immediate attention. It was a lifeline. A perfect, undeniable excuse. "Mom, I have to go to the company now. A contract needs to be signed," he said, rising quickly. "We'll talk tonight." It was a lie born of fear. He kissed her cheek, a ghost of relief in his own heart, and fled the house, leaving his truth unspoken once again. As Alex's car pulled away, a new figure entered the grand home. "My," She was a breath of fresh air, a living memory from a simpler time. Alex's mother greeted her with a warm embrace, her loneliness momentarily forgotten. The two women sat, the air filling with the kind of comfortable nostalgia that only old friends can share. Mai presented a small, thoughtful gift, a gesture of respect and affection. The mother waved it off, her gaze fixed on the girl she had known since childhood. "You've grown so beautiful, Mai," she said, her voice laced with admiration. Mai smiled, a hint of shyness in her eyes. "It's been so long. I heard Alex has become so successful." The mother's chest swelled with pride. She spoke of his bustling company, the contracts, the wood workshops, and the fruit business. A perfect life for a perfect son. She recalled how Mai, Alex, and John were once inseparable, a trio of dreams and mischief. "I'm looking for work now that I'm back," Mai confessed, her voice hopeful. The mother's eyes lit up with an idea. "My son's company is always busy. Maybe he has a place for you." She saw it so clearly. Mai, working side by side with Alex, a quiet courtship blooming under her watchful eye. The perfect past, seamlessly stitched onto the perfect future. Neither of them knew of the turbulent sea Alex navigated, of the different future he yearned for. A future that existed outside the gilded cage they were so lovingly building. Alex's day was a blur of routine. He inspected the grapefruit garden, the fruit hanging heavy and perfect. He discussed quality and contracts with Ms. Lan, his professional demeanor a mask for the turmoil within. He felt a quiet satisfaction in the work, the tangible result of his efforts. But as he drove away, a strange exhaustion settled over him. Not a tiredness of muscle, but of spirit. The polished car felt like a coffin on wheels, a stark and empty symbol of a life he was no longer sure he wanted. He arrived home, the silence more deafening than before. He had just poured a glass of water when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. His heart, already heavy, felt a cold dread. He answered. A sterile voice on the other end delivered a message so clinical, so detached, that it took a moment for the words to form a coherent thought. A diagnosis. An illness. A prognosis that felt like a death sentence. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was sharp, final. The world, which had been a complex tapestry of business, love, and social expectations, was instantly reduced to a single, terrifying truth. All his anxieties about his family's prestige, his business deals, his fears of rejection, were now nothing but the echoes of a life he might not get to live. In that moment, he was not a CEO, not a son, not a lover. He was just a man, alone, facing the vast, cold emptiness of his own mortality. The world had gone silent. After the shattering phone call, Alex's polished car carried him not to his grand office, but to a place where the earth met the sky, Tuna's farm. The silence of the city was replaced by the low hum of insects and the rustle of leaves. He arrived with bags of vegetable seeds, a small, tangible gesture of a life he so desperately clung to. He found her tending a vegetable bed, her movements practiced and graceful. The sight of her, so whole and so alive, brought a wave of grief that felt like a physical weight. He helped her, his hands clumsy with the hoe, a stark contrast to her effortless work. She smiled, her eyes filled with a pure happiness he felt he no longer deserved. The sun beat down, a warmth he felt slipping away. He couldn't keep the secret. not from her. He looked at her, the gentle curve of her brow, the light in her eyes, and the words, heavy and final, fell from his lips. He spoke of the doctor, of the diagnosis, of the future that is now a question mark. The hoe clattered to the ground. Her eyes, moments before, filled with light, filled with a disbelief that slowly, terribly, gave way to a sorrow so profound it ripped through her. A quiet sob escaped, then another, until she was crying her heart out in pain, her body shaking with a grief that mirrored his own. The vegetable bed they had built together was now a place of shared anguish. The soil, a silent witness to their shattered world. The tears came and went, leaving a quiet, shared devastation in their wake. They sat in the small garden, their shoulders touching, the fertile soil a silent witness to their shattered world. No words were needed. In the space between heartbeats, their bond deepened, forged in the fire of sorrow. The garden, once just a hobby, became a sacred sanctuary, a metaphor for their love. Fragile, beautiful, and needing constant care. He watched her as she gently tended a new row of cabbage. Her hands, once the source of his secret burden, now his anchor. He spoke of his mother's hope, a hollow, aching memory now. She just wants a grandchild to hold, he murmured, his voice thick with a longing for a future he might not have. He watched Tuna cradle little Henry, the baby's soft sighs a melody of pure life. The image filled him with an overwhelming sense of love and despair. He wanted to tell her everything, the full weight of his prognosis, the conversations with doctors, the fear that consumed his nights. But the sight of her brave, beautiful face, still streaked with tears, stopped him. He could not put any more on her shoulders. This quiet strength was her gift to him, and his silence was his gift to her. He held her hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. The world outside the garden faded away, leaving only the two of them and the precious, fleeting moments that were now all they had. Returning to his grand, silent house, Alex found the world unchanged. Yet he was a different man. The phone calls, the contracts, the relentless schedule, they were still there, but their weight had vanished. He met Mai and his mother, their conversation a familiar symphony of ambition and expectation. Mai spoke of her admiration, of a job offer he could give, a future she envisioned by his side. She saw him as a king in his own right, unaware that his kingdom had crumbled and been replaced by a quiet field of vegetables. He looked at her, then at his mother, and saw the gilded cage they had so lovingly prepared for him. There was no anger, only a profound, heartbreaking clarity. He gently declined Mai's offer, his words courteous but final, the polite mask of a man who had already chosen his path. He didn't need to explain. He didn't need a grand gesture. His mind was already miles away, walking through a small garden, his hand holding another's. He left the house not as a man running from his past, but as a man walking toward his future. He drove, not to a new business meeting, but to the farm, to the woman whose love was his only solace. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with more questions than answers, but for the first time, he felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. In the end, life was not about building a grand legacy or fulfilling someone else's expectations. It was about finding a single, beautiful place in the world where your soul could finally rest.
Một CEO thành công Elliot mắc kẹt giữa hai thế giới sự nghiệp hào nhoáng và tình yêu giản dị với Lytuna. Anh lo lắng sợ gia đình danh giá sẽ không chấp nhận cô khi đang chần chừ. Một chẩn đoán y tế bất ngờ và bi kịch đã thay đổi mọi thứ. Căn bệnh hiểm nghèo khiến Elliot nhận ra rằng những lo toan cũ trở nên vô nghĩa. Anh tìm đến Lytuna, tìm đến sự bình yên. Khi tiết lộ sự thật, cô đã đau đớn mà khóc. Khoảnh khắc đó để cùng cố tình yêu của họ. Cuối cùng Elliot phải đưa ra lựa chọn tiếp tục sống theo kỳ vọng của gia đình hay chiến đấu cho tình yêu đích thực dù cho thời gian còn lại không nhiều.